I don't think you can just do HRT as a hobby. It is very different from weight loss medicine or algorithmic medicine. There are some things in medicine that require more of that art, more of that critical thinking, more caution in some ways. I think hormone replacement therapy is one of those. And one of the core foundational principles is that exogenous hormone replacement therapy is not a one-to-one with endogenous hormone production and processing. Taking the hormone from outside in rather than producing the hormone inside out. What we see is when people are given testosterone replacement therapy, we see a decrease in all-cause mortality and an improvement in quality of life. And that's why I think learning these really core foundational principles are so important. Hey guys, welcome back to the Nico Misleh Podcast. Today I've got a podcast that is going to be a little more deep and esoteric, and I hope you guys hang out with me here for a little bit because I think it's really interesting. Actually, I think you'll find this fascinating, and I think it's helpful. So today we're going to talk about one of these very core foundational principles of hormone replacement therapy. And I refer to these often as like HRTU principles. But to be fair, they're like, I don't own them, just to clarify. Like, I think many of my mentors and people in the past have suggested these things. So, and I've taken them and really taken them to heart. And I want to describe them to you as provider to provider so that you can become extraordinary and masterful and expert level awareness when it comes to hormone replacement therapy as a provider to a patient. Okay. I think hormone replacement therapy calls for that. I really do. I don't think you can just do HRT as a hobby. It is very different from weight loss medicine or algorithmic medicine, I like to say. So algorithmic medicine is kind of what we see a lot of times in conventional medicine. And there's really good reason for that and places for that. It's really important to be able to standardize things and whatnot. And that's really obvious when it comes to something like strep throat, right? We have these signs and symptoms. Okay, great. They have X, Y, or Z. We go down the path, right? Yes. Okay, that leads us to antibiotic. That is specific to streptococcus. Fantastic. We take that antibiotic and the patient feels better and we follow up with them in a few days. Blah, 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 right? But weight loss medicine, right? We prescribe a GLP-1. We dose up and down until we get the weight loss that we're shooting for and the goal without any symptoms, and we carry on. Now, I'm not saying those types of medicine are like lame or unimportant at all. Like I think they're amazing. Surgery is very algorithmic in a lot of ways too, but in pretty much every area of medicine, there's a little bit of art and a little bit of critical thinking that has to come with it. And I think there are some things in medicine that require more of that art, more of that critical thinking, more caution in some ways, not in a negative way. And I think hormone replacement therapy is one of those. And I think that's also why not a lot of people get into hormone replacement therapy because, again, it feels overwhelming and confusing and there's a lot of stigma still and blah, blah, blah. We all know and understand that stuff. And I go into the great detail around that in the course. But I want to touch on just one of the core foundational principles that I feel like my mentors really helped instill inside my brain for the past many years as I've learned and grown more into hormone replacement therapy as a provider. And one of those foundations, I always refer to it this way. And frankly, I think it's because I'm a dork and it probably sounds more complicated than it needs to be. But one of the HRTU principles is that exogenous hormone replacement therapy is not a one-to-one with endogenous hormone production and processing. I know that's kind of a mouthful and it probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Let me try to break this down for you a little bit more now. So like in more like layman's terms, what am I saying here? So exogenous hormones, AKA, prescription hormone replacement therapy, hormones that come in tablets, pills, injections, creams, whatever. When we take those hormones and put them inside of us, whatever route we administer them, that is not the same. And this is obvious from like a 10,000 foot view, but we're going to dive a little deeper. That is not the same as when my own body produces those same hormones, right? It's not, when I say it's not a one-to-one, it's not the same type of thing. Now, testosterone in and of itself, does testosterone, if I give myself testosterone, do the same things in many ways that my body's testosterone does for me also. Absolutely. Yeah, of course. It increases lean muscle mass. It decreases, visceral adiposity. It helps improve my mood and mental clarity and blah, blah, blah. Of course. And those are very, very important principles to understand too. I mean, that's why in the course, we like hit on every single one of those hormones and like, what's good about this hormone? What's, sometimes problematic about this hormone? How do they all fit together? And what's the symphony back there? But there is a difference when all of a sudden, again, we're taking the hormone from outside in rather than producing the hormone inside out. And of course, it would be almost impossible to like truly understand that without somehow being able to see this at the, molecular level. But, one, obvious example would be, well, number one, if I give myself testosterone replacement therapy at a dose that reasonably is going to resolve symptoms, well, usually we're going to have a shutdown effect, right? We're going to have our feedback loop from our brain to my testicles, not your testicles, but that feedback loop is going to get messed up, and it's going to shut down my LH and FSH. It's going to suppress those hormones, those gonadotropins from my pituitary gland, which is then going to decrease my own intratesticular testosterone production, and not just testosterone, progesterone, pregnenolone, DHEA, blah, blah, blah. Now, what I can tell you is that in the randomized control trials and large observational studies, we've not seen a net negative in that sense at all. In fact, what we see is when people are given testosterone replacement therapy, we see a decrease in all-cause mortality and an improvement in quality of life and all the good stuff we know. Yet, we have to now consider that it's different. Here's a really, really good example of that. So if I give myself testosterone replacement therapy, I generally have to dose much higher than my own body would typically produce week in and week out. Okay, let me clarify that a little bit more. On average, a male, let's just say a male in his prime especially, and let's say really healthy, male, we've seen that the testicles produce, somewhere between maybe 7 and 10 milligrams of testosterone per day, intratesticularly. That's what we see. So, okay, over the span of a week, my own body at the healthiest point it could ever be, which again, who knows what that is these days with all the crap we have going on, but I might produce 70 milligrams per week of testosterone. Now, this is where I see some providers get tripped up. And by the way, I see this a lot coming from like endocrinologists and urologists. And I think it ironically makes sense because these guys probably know that fact, right? Like how much testosterone is produced from a testicle? Oh, this much. Only an endocrinologist or urologist would probably know that and get off on that. So they make these assumptions and say, well, if that's true, I don't want to, and there's some logic here. I don't want to stray from what the body naturally does. I should prescribe my male patients 70 or 80 milligrams of testosterone cypionate injected, once weekly. And how do those men feel? Well, generally they feel awful. It's practically like what we would consider a chemical castration. It's not going to be enough testosterone to do just about anything. It's going to have a net negative effect and probably shut down their own production of testosterone to some degree intratesticularly, but it's not enough exogenous testosterone to get rid of the symptoms. So now they're really screwed. And I've seen guys, their levels were in the 300s and then they do that regimen, let's just say 80 milligrams a week, and they come back and their levels are like in the 100s and they feel terrible. Now, it's hard to fault. Seriously, I think it's very hard to fault a urologist and endocrinologist because I see the logic. And I also see the importance of how they're understanding, hey, we don't want to disrupt the biological system at play here. We want to actually try to, meet it halfway and try to keep up with it. But unfortunately, that's not how hormone replacement therapy works. It is not a one-to-one replacement thing at all. If it was, then we would see that 70 or 80 milligrams once weekly of testosterone cypionate would probably crush it. It'd probably be great. And it would work for most guys. But it doesn't. And I mean, most of my guys need to be 150 to 200 milligrams a week total. I split the doses, of course, and we talk about that in the course. But that's where I see most symptom resolution, at literally like 4 times the dose that they're giving. What does that mean? Well, what it should tell you, number one, is that we don't really have a good understanding of endocrinology as it applies to hormone replacement therapy. We are taking an internal process, throwing it out the window, and adding something in that messes with that system. How does exogenous testosterone, again, affect all the other hormones that were typically being produced in the testicles? Progesterone and DHEA and pregnenolone. And okay, yeah, maybe they're really small amounts, but hey, little goes a long way in the human body. Maybe those hormones were doing something really important. And maybe that's why we see some guys feel a lot better when we add something like HCG, human chorionic gonadotropin, in, because it restores some of that hormone production and processing. Maybe it's the LH, the luteinizing hormone. We know that in the literature, luteinizing hormone has really interesting cognitive effects. And in fact, it appears that men with low LH levels have some issues with cognitive function. We even see LH seems to be a positive thing on the brain in terms of like things like Parkinson's disease and tremors. So there's all kinds of really interesting things here. And by the way, I'm not asking you to get caught up in that stuff. Okay. I find it interesting and I want you to know that. I just want you to know it, or at least have come across that, so that as you're providing hormone replacement therapy and testosterone replacement therapy to your men and women, you're operating from this more humble place of, hey, the body does very different things when we give hormones from the outside in rather than what's produced inside out, so to speak. And I think that's really beautiful. I mean, I think it's like one of the most interesting things about the world of hormone replacement therapy is like we're still on this new frontier and we're learning more about androgen receptors and estrogen receptors and you know, how sensitive or insensitive they are, right? It seems to mirror like type 2 diabetes in a lot of way, right? We see in the literature that there are such things as progesterone resistance and androgen resistance, just like there is insulin resistance. And what does that mean? And what does that do? By the way, we now know that some of these hormones don't need to touch those receptors to have the effect. They can actually do it instead of being on the the outside of the cell coming in, it can actually just go right into the cell and communicate within the cell and have this cascade of effects and produce different proteins and things of that nature. I think that stuff is so fascinating. So again, that principle is really important because when it comes to dosing hormone replacement therapy, a lot of people have it in their heads. Well, I don't want to give a young female, maybe she's 20, I'll bet she doesn't need 200 milligrams of progesterone. That's a big dose. A bigger dose might be for someone who's older. She probably needs less. Well, how do you know that? That would make sense. That would be true if it was medicine, right? Like ibuprofen, for example. I don't want to give, maybe 400 milligrams of ibuprofen to a 10-year-old. That might be a lot based on their weight and height and stuff. But when it comes to hormones aren't really medicine, so to speak. It's not the same. It's not the conventional medicine that we think of. These, kind of synthetic pharmaceutical substances that we've created. We're providing bioidentical hormones. And so we do actually get the properties of that hormone, which is amazing. So again, we have to be able to respect and understand that when I give someone progesterone, it's not like I'm going to all of a sudden end up with side effects that I could have never foreseen, like in some of these other novel drugs that are created by the big pharma industry. We're going to see similar effects as to what we would see with just progesterone that's produced internally. The difference is the way it is processed and metabolized, the way it interacts with our body in and of itself. When I give 200 milligrams weekly of testosterone cypionate, that is going to have radically different effects than what is typically produced and introduced to my cells via my testicles, for example, or via a gal's ovaries. Do you see what I'm saying here? So I think it's such a valuable principle to wrap your head around. And by the way, it's going to take you forever. Like, this is one of those principles that you have to remind yourself about. Because I think a lot of us get caught up in this idea that, well, the dosing is all that matters, and the numbers on the lab reference sheet is all that matters. And guys, that couldn't be further from the truth. And that is why it's so important to understand that the numbers on the paper are interesting and they're helpful. They're like guides. The dosage is interesting and helpful. But at the end of the day, what we're really still looking for is symptom resolution and an improvement in the quality of life of the patient, of the individual. And we seem to understand this with insulin. Again, I pick on insulin in a good way because it's one of the more commonplace things that we see. As nurses, doctors, physicians' assistants, we've seen more patients than probably we can fathom on insulin, especially type 2 diabetics, to be clear. But even type 1 diabetics, if I eat an apple and you eat the same apple at the same time, and we chew and swallow at the same rate and blah, 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 will our blood sugars be identical in 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours? Probably not. Why? Well, because we're different people. We're different sizes and shapes, different genetic backgrounds. We have all kinds of different things going on. Am I stressed out? Are you stressed out? Who's more stressed out? There are so many variables at play there. And at the end of the day, do you have more insulin resistance than I do? Or more sensitivity? So then the question becomes, well, will we then need the same dose of insulin? Well, of course not. Just because your blood sugar is 300 and mine's 200 doesn't mean that 20 units is going to be the same as 20 units for me. Even if our blood sugars were the same, it probably still wouldn't matter, right? Does 20 units immediately rectify, a blood sugar of 300 for both of us? I don't know. I might need more. That is, again, more obvious when it comes to diabetes than it is to testosterone replacement therapy or HRT. And maybe it's because we can do finger sticks and pricks and all that stuff and get immediate results from, okay, so it's 80 now, so we need more or less, whatever. Maybe I wish we could do that with hormones. But, at the end of the day, again, what I'm getting at here is that hormone replacement therapy, exogenous hormone replacement therapy, is not a one-to-one with what we produce and manufacture and process internally. And so we have to have great humility and respect for that whole idea. There's a famous scientist who I really like. He's great ways of kind of thinking through things. His name's Dr. Brett Weinstein. And he said something really profound. He talks about the human body. He compares humans to computers. And let me be clear on why he does that. So a computer is and I've talked about this before, but it's worth repeating. A computer is a complex system. A laptop, a desktop, whatever you're using, even your cell phone, right? Technically it's a computer. A computer is a complex system. What he means by that is it's complex in the sense that, there's all these hardware pieces, right? There's, maybe some wires and maybe some, chips and memory cards and a screen and an interface and all this stuff. And then there's software too, but just from the hardware side, it's really complex. I mean, I would have no idea if you just said, Nico, here's all the things you need to build a computer, build me one. I would have no idea what I'm doing, right? And I'm sure I could watch a YouTube video, read a book about it, and probably finagle my way through it. But man, that is complex. And then when you get to like the user experience, well, if you ask me, Nico, how does a computer work? I might be able to tell you what I know. It's like ones and zeros, right? It's like the language of computers, ones and zeros bouncing around, 11000011 equals X, Y, or Z, right? It's just input and output. But I don't know how that works. I don't know how you would program that. I have a very, 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 beyond 10,000 foot view of how computers work because it's a complex system. However, we can figure it out. And there are people who figure it out. And it is very black and white. The ones and zeros, they always equal X. The output is the same. Now, when it comes to human beings, we are not a complex system. We are a complicated system. And I think that's really apt because I think for the longest time, we have viewed the human organism as a complex system, like very mechanistic. And there certainly are, I'm not disavowing that it's not complex in many ways, right? We understand that there are certain things that are kind of black and white to some degree, but it's more complicated. There's so many more variables. Something I always think about, and again, just humor me here. We have I think the number is in the trillions of cells that are inside our body and outside our body that are microbes, right? Like germs and bacteria and fungi and viruses, like trillions more of them than there are of our own cells, right? What I'm saying is the microbes outnumber us. And yet we work in this really interesting, mostly symbiotic, sometimes parasitic type of relationship with each other. And we've been doing that for millions and millions of years. And so when you change something, not only are we thinking about how does this affect my own cellular biology, but what about the ecosystem's cellular biology? How does not just the singular organism, but the organisms become affected when I do X, Y, or Z? And we now see that all the time in like all the GI studies that are coming out, right? Like if we do fecal microbiota transplants, right? We take someone's who's healthy, we take that healthy person's poop and we implant that into a non-healthy person's gut. They generally become healthy. We've seen mental health improvements. We've seen autism rates improve. We've seen ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, chronic colitis, like anything you can think of. We've seen it all improve. And we didn't do anything to the human being's cell structure. We actually added someone else's ecosystem into theirs. And it completely altered that ecosystem. And that is where I think medicine is so amazing and it's so profound. In a lot of ways, it's almost like changing the software, right? Or upgrading the software on our phone, right? The phone starts getting kind of crummy and slow, and then we upgrade the software. Oh, it's so much better. We fix all these bugs and features. I think that is tremendous. I think there is so much value there, and we're going to continue seeing amazing stuff coming from that. And so I think hormone replacement therapy shares something within that realm because it is a bioidentical, quote unquote, natural hormone that we are taking and putting inside of us. And we see these really amazing net positive outcomes when we do something like that. Just like we do with these fecal microbiota transplants, we see really similar results in a lot of ways. And I find that to be fascinating, but it's complicated. It's really complicated. It's hard to measure that stuff. It's hard to quantify and structure data around that. But I think that is also what makes HRT so fun and so interesting. And I think that I feel sorry for providers who don't get to experience a little bit of that, at least every now and then. When you're stuck doing the whole like typical conventional medicine, especially primary care and stuff, it's tough. I feel like you don't get to be creative. You don't get to really think through problems in the depth that you probably want to, and at the depth that patient likely deserves. And it's heartbreaking. It's really sad, and it's uncomfortable. And I think when you pursue hormone replacement therapy, yes, is it hard at first? Sure. That's not a walk in the park. If it was, everybody would do it. But I want everybody to do it, and so I want to help make it more simple. And I want to help it feel less overwhelming and more amazing and beautiful and interesting and fun and cool and like awe-inspiring. And that's why I think learning these really core foundational principles are so important, because it breathes life back into your brain again of like, hey, Nico, you got to think through these things again. You got to get a little deeper, and don't be afraid. It's okay. We've all started from somewhere where, we had no, again, I always say 10 years ago, I was nothing I knew nothing when it came to hormone replacement, absolutely zero. And where I've come today, it's amazing. It's incredible. And I want to keep learning and keep growing because it's changing all the time. I think that's fun. Again, I don't think that's a bug. That's a feature. I'm never bored, ever. I really am not. I love that. And I want you to love that. My mom, when I was homeschooled, she always impressed upon us how learning should be fun. It can feel challenging, sometimes a little frustrating, but it should, at the end of the day, be something you love and enjoy and you come back to. And you can apply that broadly, but especially when it comes to hormone replacement therapy, I think it's awesome. I want you to love this. I really do. I want you to love it. And I hope that by teaching this in a way that's interesting and, again, awe-inspiring, that it provides that to you. Because there's nothing worse than I've been in a position. When I was younger, I was terrible. Let's be honest. I'm terrible at math. And I don't like to talk about myself that way. I'm not terrible at math. I don't love math. I don't get off on math. And I struggled with it a lot when I was little. And, I think that at the end of the day, a lot of that stemmed from the fact that I did not have a great teacher when it came to math. My mother was amazing when I was younger, doing fairly basic math. But when it started to grow up, so to speak, and get into the algebras and calculuses and all that kinds of stuff, my mom, God love her, she wasn't a math major, and she'd probably tell you she doesn't get off on math either. We're readers, we're English people, right? And historians, we love all that stuff. And I never had a good math person. They were very hard to listen to and dry. And I think they just assumed that everybody gets it the same way. And it wasn't until my freshman year in college where I basically like flunked out of math. I was so bad, like in the pre-testing to get into college, it was so bad that they were like, you have to take this math class. It was the title. I always call it pre-math, but if it sounded like that, it was in this trailer, like for losers, because we couldn't get into a real math class. We had to take that class. There was 0 credits to it. Like it did not count towards your credits, but you had to take that class to get into Algebra 1. It was a huge blow to my ego, of course. Like it was a huge blow and I hated it. And it made me hate math even more. But the professor I had, her name was Natalia, and I will always hate myself for never remembering her last name. But her first name was Natalia. And she was lovely. She was really, really sweet. And she was like a Cornell grad, really smart, super well educated, and somehow ended up at this little community college in Cincinnati, Ohio, teaching pre-math to losers like me. And she was so kind and patient. Like she was like an angel. Like I mean that in like the most serious way. Like she was a literal gift from God. Because I was seriously at a point where I was like, I don't know if I can do this. Like, I don't know if I'm meant to do this. I don't know if I can make it through. Like, I wanted to get into medicine. I was like, there's no way I'm going to be able to do this without understanding math. And I can't seem to wrap my head around it. And she was so good at taking these really complex things and just making them simple and clear. But something else she did that was great was she didn't just make it superficial. She gave depth to her answers, probably more than she needed to, right? But it helped me really understand math, like the theory of math and like why literally is this important? Has anybody ever actually asked you that, Nico? I remember her asking me that question. Like, has anybody ever asked you why this is so important? And I think I gave some dumb answer like, well, yeah, because, you have to learn how to divide, subtract, and add. And, that helps you get through college or whatever. And then you'll never use it again. And she was like, no, 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 no. No. She was like, that's the wrong answer. She said, math is important because it's one of the most beautiful languages of the universe. And I remember being like, what? Like, what did you say? Like, what are you talking about? But it like hit me 20 seconds later, like a ton of bricks. Like, oh my God. Oh, I see what she's saying. To understand math is to have this new type of relationship with the world that I live in and how I interact with the world and how the world interacts with me. And I thought that is so profound. And it made me like, okay, tell me more about that, Natalia. What did you mean by that? And I remember her going on this huge, amazing rant. Like she was on a soapbox just talking about math and why people they never ask why, and they don't really get the right answer. And so we developed this relationship based on like the beauty of math and how it could really improve my life in ways that I never considered. I got an A in every single math class until I graduated. And I had never gotten better than a C in math in my entire life, ever. And it was because of her. It really was. And I wish that, Natalia, if somehow you're listening to this podcast, I want you to know I love you. And I'm super thankful for someone like you stepping into my life. And it really was a God thing. Like he put this amazing woman in my life to really inspire me to learn something that is still to this day, not my favorite subject, not my cup of tea, but something that I have great reverence for and appreciation for. And I hope that even if hormone replacement therapy somehow isn't your thing, and I get that, I hope that at the very least I can provide that sense of like, wow, this is so cool. Like how interesting. And I think that, again, when you understand those foundational principles, like Natalia talked about math is the language of the universe. Well, I think hormone replacement therapy is one of the languages of the human body. It's the way our body interacts with itself and the outside world in a lot of ways. And so I hope you can take that and think about it and chew on it. And if you haven't dipped your toes in hormone replacement therapy, I think it'd be a great time for you to do that. So that being said, if you're not on my daily email list, please join. It's great. I write a daily email Monday through Friday, literally every day. Comes out in the morning. No ChatGPT. It's just me pounding on a keyboard. It's a lot of fun to write because I get to interact with a lot of you and get to know you a little bit better. But the goal is just to educate you, to provide a lot of great information on HRT and business and medicine at large. It's great. It's in the show notes on the link below. If you click on it, you can find it there, Nico's Daily Email. You can also check us out at HRTUniversity.com. That's our website where you can find our amazing master course that is literally like, I hope the breadth of knowledge that you receive from that is so worthwhile. And we've had such amazing reviews. There's tons of great testimonials in there. So check those out. And then also don't forget, we have a free Facebook group, a public Facebook group, just to learn more about HRT University and connect with some other providers out there who are also interested in HRT. Guys, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and I will see you at the next episode. Take care.